Hello and welcome to the TechnoBite YouTube channel. This is my first video, so if you enjoy this, you might want to watch some of the other stuff I make here. Today we are going to be looking into the blue TryHackMe machine. TryHackMe is a platform with these CTF boxes, and CTF stands for Capture the Flag. And essentially these emulate or virtualize these systems that have vulnerabilities that creator made in them. And your goal as the player, as the attacker, is to find those vulnerabilities and exploit them. And then once you gain access to the systems, you extract the quote-unquote flags, hence the capture the flag, and submit it here. You can submit these questions for points or whatever in this gamified system. And learn cybersecurity to get a good example of how these things can be applied in the real world, of course. I'm not hacking like actual production systems. I'm not breaking any laws here. This is completely legal, and it's free too. Some of it's paid, but I believe this box is free. Let me just look at it's somewhere here. I'll have to look at that later, but I believe this one is free. And these are pretty realistic. There may be some scenarios where some are more realistic than others, but of course, they're designed to be of the utmost realism. Before we should stop rambling, and we should get on to the actual hacking. Before we do that, we have to make sure that we're connected to their VPN. And so you might have heard all those ads about getting Nord or Express VPN. Those are really not what this is. In this case, we're using a VPN in order to connect directly to these machines. So these aren't available on the open internet because that's probably not a good idea, right? And you have your own VPN configuration, of course. I'm connected to the US West VIP, and I have VIP because I paid them money. But I can just download my configuration file. I already have it downloaded and set up. As you can see, I'm connected. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to have to hassle with that, you can always start their attack box, their Kali Linux. I'm using Linux here, but theoretically, you could use all these systems on a Windows machine, or you could run all these kind of stuff in a virtual machine. I'm not really going to get into showing how to do that. There's some other great tutorials about doing that on the internet. I might link them in the description. Before I do that, let me just get into my terminal. So I'm running Arch Linux. Typically, I'd recommend using Kali for something like this, but I have all my tools installed here, and it's preferably what I use. I'm using my recording computer. And as you can see here, if I go to check my status, I am connected. So I'm on ton 0 network interface, and it says this is my internal IP address. And like here, same thing. Cool. So I'm going to deploy this machine, and I'll skip ahead when it actually shows up. Okay, so this machine has started up, and we have the IP address. So this is designed to be a series, but I'm going to treat it kind of like a boot to root. Boot to root meaning just not a whole lot of help here, right? Typically, you'll see a machine, it'll have an area for a user flag and a root flag. Root typically means the most privileged account in the system, right? So think like an admin account. Root is the term we typically use on Linux. And then user, meaning user, right? You have code execution. Hey, this is future me here. It appears I forgot to mention this in my original recording, but I thought I should mention that if you don't exactly understand what I'm doing, that's fine. That's to be expected. Eventually, if you see things enough and you read the documentation, you'll begin to understand kind of the underlying aspects of this. But for right now, what's important is to look at the process and the steps that I take to kind of demonstrate. Thank you for listening. Right, so I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to use a tool that probably anyone in the cybersecurity world has known of by now. It's called Nmap. So, and Nmap just lets me scan for ports, right? So ports are are the doors to computers, right? It is the entrance, right? Like, you can't access a computer without a port, right? And so ports typically resolve certain service in the machine, right? So port 80 is the port used for web traffic, right? For browsing the internet. 443 is also used a lot for HTTPS, which is that connection secure, right? So it's even connected via HTTPS, and that uses port 443. And of course, there's other ports for different things, and I'll talk about them if we come across them. So I'm going to use the command arguments sc and sv. Sc stands for script default. It's not really the most clearest thing ever, but if you do this stuff enough, you will begin to remember what to put down. So basically all it does is it runs some basic enumeration along with its default and map enumeration, and sv runs version enumeration, so it will try to automatically figure out what version of the software if a port is open. And I'm going to copy paste that IP address, and you could do this to just about any system on the internet, right? Every computer has an IP address somewhere. You need to get their public IP address, which is not hard, right? And this might take a bit, not too long though. Okay, so now we have our version number, my version numbers, and we can see they have Microsoft RPC, NetBIOS, some common stuff. I think that's RDP, which is strange. As you can see, it did some automatic SMB enumeration. And SMB, it's I believe it's server message block, and it's a protocol that works, I think, on Windows only, but there may be some next versions. Samba, I think. And it tells you a lot about the system, right? So we know it's running Windows 7 Professional 7601 Service Pack 1. And that's interesting because typically the older you find of the Windows systems, the better they are to exploit, typically. And it looks like here this is all we're gonna get. But I think if I am correct here, I'm gonna use a custom script. Not custom, but it's pre-built, and I'm gonna use tac script is equal to vuln, and this is an nmap script that will automatically test for some certain vulnerabilities. And I've already done this machine, so I know kind of what the exploit is. But say we don't know exactly what the exploit is here. We're gonna do this. I'm gonna run it with sudo. Sudo just lets me run it as root. So, oh goodness, you see my name there. So that will take a while. As you can see, it's running NSC. NSC is the nmap scripting engine. It does some scripting stuff, and it's useful for that. I'm also going to, I'm not sure if you can see this, but I'm using something called Tilex, which allows me to have multiple terminals in one screen, so I can multitask efficiently. So while this will take probably a while, I'm going to use something called Metasploit, and Metasploit is probably the most useful tool you can learn when you're first starting out. And essentially what Metasploit is it is a library and framework for a bunch of known vulnerabilities, right? So, it's your hacker's best friend, right? So if I just want to search up Apache HTTP, and Apache HTTP is a really common web server, right? So you can see we have all these different Apache vulnerabilities. Well, I might as well just show you now. So the exploit this is vulnerable to is something called Eternal Blue. And this will show up in a second. I'm just going to save time. And essentially, Eternal Blue, it is a remote code execution vulnerability, right? I'm just gonna look it up. So Wikipedia will have better definition on this than I do. Eternal Blue is a computer exploit developed by the U.S. National Security Agency, the NSA. So I'm gonna use their I can use of course, a vulnerability here. So I have the numbers here. So I'm gonna use their auxiliary scanner, and this just scans for it. Won't actually exploit it. So let's look at the info here. What we can set. So we have their various options. R host, let's do the R port, right? So let's look back up here. Okay, well, that R port is open, so I assume it works, right? We don't need to set any of this. We're just going to set the R hosts. Let's set R hosts to be equal to that vulnerable IP, right? I'm going to run it by typing exploit, although you could also use the run command. Exploit sounds way cooler, though. Going to load, and the host is most likely vulnerable to MS17-010, and that's Microsoft's little naming scheme for this vulnerability. You might have seen other MS number vulnerabilities, and those are kind of on the same thing right there. It's that equivalent. Let's go back and search for those Eternal Blue exploits again. So we have, looks like here an exploit, and it's Eternal Blue. So as you can see here, it says it's a remote kernel pool corruption. So you don't have to understand what that means. Essentially, it's some really cool low-level kernel exploits, and it already set our payload for us. Something called Meterpreter. Meterpreter is like this really cool. It's essentially like a backdoor, right? It allows me to run a bunch of cool stuff and do some post-exploitation commands, and it's like really scary if you know what you're doing. Let's set our R hosts again. This is kind of the technical speak in it. I'm definitely not going to try to explain this, because if I would, we'd be here all day, and you would probably click off this video. I'm just going to type exploit and do some stuff. And okay, that's some cool stuff. I'm just gonna look in the plot here. As you can see, it already used that scanner as a check method, so of course we already did that, so we know that. And now essentially what it's doing is it's doing some fancy kernel exploitation stuff. I'm again not gonna try to explain this. Okay, this is me from the future again. It appears that when I was running my exploit, it failed many times, and it ended up crashing the system that I was targeting, and there's a lot of empty clips where you just see me waiting for things to load, so I have clipped that, and you will see me very less enthusiastic by the end. Okay, hello. You probably see a cut there, but there was some issues with the box internally, and I somehow found a way to make it fail. So, and it crashed. So that's unfortunate, of course. So you can see here we do have a session. This is a command shell, not a interpreter. I stopped from being an interpreter for this reason. I'm going to run a dir command. Dir just lists all the files in the current directory. So as you know, we're in the system32 directory. You know, crazy place. I'm going to go back to this root C drive and see what we can find. So I can see here, there is a flag1.txt. So I'm going to do, I think it's more flag1.txt. I don't know. I use Linux, so I don't use Windows. But yeah, so now we have the flag, and if we were doing this for real, we'd submit that to TryHackMe, and we'd get some points for that. But we're not. So I'm going to get a background. Wait, no. Shoot, is it background? Yes, I'm going to background the session. So as you can see here, we have sessions, and so these just manage what kind of sessions we have. So for learning purposes, I'm going to go look up shell to interpreter. Shoot, it's somewhere. Yeah, so 22. Use 22. And so what this does, it takes a shell session, which is basically just a shell, and it turns to an interpreter. So as you can see here, we can look at sessions. Session 7. So we're gonna set session 7 and set L host. We're gonna want to use our other one, or the one, and okay, let's just hope this works. We're gonna upgrade the session ID, and yeah, okay, so sending stages, and so interpreter, it requires you to send stages, and stages are like it's the equivalent of like dropping malware, right? I mean, all we're really doing is dropping malware. Now we have interpreter session. Now we can do sessions and then session ID. We're gonna do 8. So let's look in here. So this has a great help menu. We're gonna look at some of these commands. So first here we have like info, all this kind of stuff. We can try to use SSL to encrypt it. Let's do ls. Shoot, we're probably in. Yeah, we're in here. We can dump the SAM database. This means we can try to get some passwords. Right? We can take a webcam recording. We can list webcams. I don't think we have any webcams on this hack machine yet, so we couldn't find any webcams on this machine. But theoretically, if we're hacking some machine, we could do that. We could play an audio file on their speakers. Take a screenshot of their desktop. We could get their desktop. We could start a keylogger. That'd be interesting. We could like move around their mouse. Let's see what. Let's see. We can look at the get UID, so we can see what user we're running as. Oh, we're running a system. So anything starting with NT authority is typically good, especially system though. System is the equivalent of like the most administrator. You might be running as an admin, but you're not running a system. System is like the highest of the high level permissions. We could look at all this kind of stuff. We could try to forward a port. Steal some tokens. Let's look at sysinfo. So we're running, of course, as John PC. We're in work group. There's 0 logged on users. We could find this already in Nmap, but still. I think we're already listed as system. I'm gonna look at process list. So as you can see here, I believe we are running as. Let's get process ID. Okay, so interpreter, it will, I guess, embed itself in another process. So running as that process, of course. And it looks like we are running as 2204. So we are currently running as PowerShell. Which is fine. If you're running as something like Spool or something like that, we'd probably want to change to one of these things because they are more trusted, I guess is the term. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but it's important. And yeah, we basically have full control of it. We could run a crypto miner. We could do whatever we want. We now have hacked the box. We have defeated their security. Thank you for watching.